Breaking news tonight, just southeast of Wichita, the KBI investigating a shooting that left 5 people dead, including 4 children. A 6th person, the suspect, also dead.
On a quiet street in a Kansas town of about 12,000 people, a police officer once sat down and wrote something into a report that he probably hoped he'd never have to think about again. He wrote that the couple he'd just spoken with seemed to be suffering from mental health issues, or maybe using drugs. He wrote that they were agitated, delusional in his words. He told the next officer who might get called to that address to use caution. That report is dated November 2024. 21 months later, 6 members of that same family were found dead inside their home. 4 of them were children. The youngest hadn't turned 4. This is the story of what was written down, who saw it, and why none of it was enough. If you're new to Crime Horizon HQ, subscribe now. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories. We break down cases like this every single week. Winfield sits in Cowley County, in the southern part of Kansas, the kind of place where a police chief can say, without exaggerating, that he knows most of the streets by heart. Sometime before 2024, a couple named Ronald Williams and Kelly George moved into a rental home on West 9th Avenue near Stewart Street. Ronald was 53. Kelly was 44. Together they had 4 children. Carol, 9 years old. Ronald Jr., 7. Sarah, 5. And Kelly, the youngest, just 3, named after her mother. From the outside, it was an ordinary house. A porch, a yard, a child's plastic playhouse pushed up against the railing. What wasn't ordinary was how often police ended up standing on that porch. Winfield's police chief, Robbie DeLong, later told reporters that over the 2 years this family lived at that address, officers responded to the home more than 20 times. Not 20 calls about the same argument. 20 separate contacts, some from neighbors, some from the couple calling on themselves. Here's the strange part. Almost none of it turned into a formal case. In October of 2024, Ronald was walking his children to school when a woman passed by walking her dog. Something about it upset him enough that he pulled a gun. His explanation, when police arrived, was that he was protecting himself from the animal. No charges followed. The dispatch log survived, though. A radio operator's note describes it plainly. Williams walking kids to school, upset a woman was walking her dog, pulled a gun to protect himself. A year later, in October of 2025, officers were called out again over a dispute between the family and someone nearby. The reporting party didn't want to press charges. The file was closed with no further action, the same pattern repeating itself. And weeks before the killings, in late July of 2026, construction workers on a nearby job told police that Ronald and Kelly had been photographing them and threatening to report them to immigration authorities, accusing the workers of living under false identities and of following the couple across 3 different cities, from Kansas City to Wichita to Winfield. Every one of these calls on its own might read as a strange neighborhood dispute. A few too many police visits for one address, maybe. But stitched together, they trace something else. A family that officers were watching get more agitated, more paranoid, more convinced that the world outside their door was closing in. That November 2024 note wasn't the only time it was written down. It's just the clearest one. Police weren't the only agency with a file on this family. Records show Kansas's Child Welfare Agency, the Department for Children and Families, had its own history with Ronald and Kelly. On at least 2 occasions, staff at the local DCF office considered banning the couple from the building because of how aggressive they became during visits. At one point, the agency was preparing paperwork to formally restrict them from coming in at all. Buried in one of those records is a detail that says almost as much as the incident itself. The couple apparently believed the agency was watching their house, that caseworkers or police were driving past, incognito, to observe them. Whether that surveillance was real or imagined, it tells you something about the state of mind investigators were documenting, long before anyone connected these individual reports into a single, alarming pattern. And this is where the story usually loses people, because none of this, by itself, looks like a countdown to something catastrophic. A gun pulled over a dog. A paranoid complaint about construction workers. An aggressive visit to a government office. Read individually, in the order they happened, spread out over 2 years. They look like the kind of chaotic, low-level calls that fill a small-town police blotter every single week. That's exactly the problem. That's how something like this slips through. Before any of the Winfield calls, Ronald Williams already had a record stretching back 3 decades. In 1997, when he was in his 20s, he was involved in an incident with a minor near Kansas City. He was convicted the following year of attempted indecent liberties with a child, a conviction that placed him on the state's sex offender registry. Court records from 25 show a separate case in which he was accused of holding a woman inside a home against her will, taping over windows, covering them with foil, and threatening to beat her if she tried to leave. Between 1995 and 2024, he faced felony charges across 3 different Kansas counties for battery, assault on a law enforcement officer, burglary, attempted rape, kidnapping, and violating a protective order. He also used several aliases over the years. Freddie Williams, Laren Williams, Jerome Williams. This is the man Winfield police were dealing with every time a new call came in about that house on West 9th. Not a stranger with no history, a person whose name, if you ran it, came back with 3 decades of red flags already attached. And still, on paper, each new call in Winfield was its own isolated incident, evaluated on its own, without an arrest, without a formal charge, without the kind of single, unmistakable event that forces a system to intervene. Tuesday, August 11, 2026, started like any other morning in Winfield. At around 8:50, a 911 dispatcher answered a call. The man on the line identified himself as Ronald Williams. He told the dispatcher, calmly, that he had killed his entire family and that he was about to kill himself. As it happened, officers were already nearby, working an unrelated call just blocks away. They reached the house within minutes. As the first officer approached the front door, a single gunshot rang out from inside. The officer pulled back immediately. With no way to know whether an armed person was still alive inside the house, police did the only thing procedure allows in that moment. They set a perimeter, and they waited. For close to 2 hours, that house sat in silence, while officers, sheriff's deputies, and Kansas Highway Patrol troopers held the line outside. No further shots, no movement, no way in without risking whoever might still be alive. Around 11 that morning, officers finally moved in. Inside, they found 6 people dead: Ronald Williams, Kelly George, and all 4 of their children. That evening, Chief DeLong stood in front of a bank of cameras and told reporters this was one of the hardest scenes he had encountered in more than 20 years on the job. He said he couldn't remember anything close to it in his entire career. He also said something that's worth sitting with. He acknowledged that police had dealt with Ronald before, including reports of erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to that Tuesday morning, but he was direct about the limits of what any of it had shown. Nothing in those prior encounters, he said, pointed to this. It's an honest answer. It's also not a comfortable one, because it means every warning sign we've just walked through, the gun pulled over a dog, the DCF conflict, the officer's written note about delusions, all of it existed inside a system built to respond to individual incidents, not to project where a pattern like this was heading. For the first day, that was the story. One man, in the middle of some kind of breakdown, who ended his family's life, and then his own. 3 days later, that story changed. On August 14th, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation released an update that reframed the entire case. Investigators said the evidence indicated this wasn't a sudden act by one man acting alone in a moment of crisis. Both Ronald Williams and Kelly George, investigators concluded, had planned the killings together. Authorities said they found no evidence of a fight or a physical struggle that might have triggered what happened that morning. This was, according to the KBI's own language, a shared, premeditated plan. Sit with that for a second, because it changes how every earlier detail reads. The paranoia about surveillance, the aggressive visits to the DCF office, the gun pulled on a stranger. These weren't necessarily signs of one man spiraling while everyone else around him carried on normally. They may have been visible pieces of two parents, together, moving toward the same devastating decision. There will be no trial in this case, no courtroom to walk into, because both people responsible are among the 6 who died. What's left is a case file, headed for the Cowley County Attorney's Office, documenting a pattern that took 2 years, at least 20 police contacts, an open child welfare case, and 1 written warning about delusions to fully take shape, and still ended exactly the way officers apparently feared it might.
Well, thank you for being here. Obviously, this is a very tragic day in our community. At approximately 8:50 a.m., our officers received a 911 call from a male individual who stated that he had killed his entire family and he was getting ready to kill himself. Fortunately, officers were in the area working another incident and responded pretty much immediately. First officer on scene was approaching the house when they heard a single gunshot. At that point, they retreated. There was no other indication of any other loss of life, and so standard protocol was to set up a perimeter and start working the incident as a barricade situation. At approximately 10:57 a.m., after enough backup and other methods had been exhausted, the decision was made to attempt to breach the front door just to see if they could see inside what was occurring. Immediately, the door was breached and officers called for assistance and medical. There inside, they located 6 individuals deceased. Of those 6, included 1 male suspect, 1 female resident, and a total of 4 children ages 3 to 9. At this time, due to the size and scope, the decision was made to call the Kansas Bureau of Investigations for assistance. They responded, and at that time we started just coordinated efforts to work through the scene. I want to thank these other agencies that helped: the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, Winfield Fire and EMS, the Southern Kansas SWAT Team, the Kansas Highway Patrol, and the Sumner County Sheriff's Office. I want to make something very clear to the community. This was an isolated incident. There is no ongoing threat. However, as hard as this is to hear, but I want to specifically thank the Kansas Bureau of Investigations for assisting in this case.
Hello, I'm Jason Diaz, the Special Agent in charge with the KBI. This morning we were called by the Winfield Police Department to assist with the matter you just heard about. Whenever we arrived on scene, we did activate special agents, and which would be the investigative asset, as well as our crime scene response team. Whenever we arrived on scene, we confirmed that there were indeed 6 deceased individuals inside the residence, and I'm actually going to read off their names now. The suspect in this, the shooter, is Ronald H. Williams Sr., a 53-year-old male, and that's spelled R-O-N-A-L-D-H, Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S, Sr. The 5 other victims in this case are Kelly L. George, a 44-year-old female. It's Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, L. George, G-E-O-R-G-E. The next victim is Carol A. Williams, C-A-R-O-L-A. Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S, a 9-year-old female. The next one, Ronald H. Williams Jr., Ronald, R-O-N-A-L-D-H, Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S, Jr., a 7-year-old male. Sarah K. Williams, S-A-R-A-H, K, Williams, Williams, a 5-year-old female, and Kelly M. McGee-Williams. It's Kelly, Kelly M, and then McGee-Williams is MAGEE-WILLIAMS, and she was a 3-year-old female.
In the days after, people in Winfield started leaving things outside the house on West 9th. Flowers, stuffed animals, a pinwheel spinning in the yard where 4 children used to play. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation released a family photo of the children, taken on that same porch, all 4 of them smiling at the camera. It's the kind of image that's almost unbearable to look at once you know what came after it, and there's a reason we're not describing it further here. Some things don't need more detail to make their point. The investigation into this case remains open. Whether any agency, DCF, the courts, or the police department itself could have acted differently at any single point along that 2-year timeline is a question Winfield will likely be asking long after the news vans leave. What we know for certain is this. The system that's supposed to catch a pattern like this one is built, almost entirely, out of individual moments. A call, a report, a note in a file. Any one of those moments, on its own, rarely looks like enough to act on. It's only afterward, laid out end to end, that they start to look like something else entirely. A record of every point where someone could have stepped in and didn't. 4 children never made it past the age of 9. They were children. They should have had a future. And nothing that happened inside that house can change that truth. And a small Kansas town is left holding a file that, in hindsight, told them almost everything, just never all at once, and never in time. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Crime Horizon HQ. We cover true crime cases by looking beyond the headline and examining the people, evidence, investigations, and unanswered questions left behind.